welcome back. And I always consider it an honor when we have time to sit down with our good friend Percy McCray. Reverend McCray is a cancer survivor himself. He's an ordained minister. He's founder of the Percy McCray Ministries. He's also the former National Director of Specialized Outreach with the City of Hope and the host of Health, Hope, and Inspiration. It's a podcast. He does have a website, percymccrayministries.org, and there's the picture of his landing page there. Brother Percy, good to see you, friend. How are you, man?
Hey, buddy, how you doing? Happy New Year.
Doing good. It's really interesting that I'd have you on today. And the reason being is I'm still, in my heart, saddened. I lost a very good friend just hours ago to cancer. And
oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's just a subtle reminder of this problem and the degree of this. I don't know why we're not calling cancer epidemic. But it just is so pervasive in our culture, and you worked with it for years. I guess it's a rhetorical question, but is it getting any better?
Well, it depends on how you want to confront the conversation. With regard to, first of all, again, sincere condolences to you and the family of your friend that passed away. The numbers of proliferation are increasing. In fact, this year, last year, we went from 1.9 to 2 million people being estimated to being diagnosed with cancer on an annual basis in America. And so those numbers are going up. The good news is that we have more people who are surviving a battle of cancer. So that's kind of the yin and the yang of it all. Mm-hmm. But to your opening comment, this is still the #2 killer in America, and it is still very much part of our environment and landscape. And so we can't avoid this conversation no matter how we try and no matter how uncomfortable it may be for individuals. So that's the good and the bad with respect to this.
All right,
the other good news is there's a Reverend Percy McCray that exists who specializes in this conversation, and I'm not afraid of this dialogue from a faith perspective.
Well, that's exactly where I was going. I wanted to squeeze your heart just for a moment. I've done quite a few shows lately and interviews of people that talking about, in some cases, church attendance is going up. Some cases, church attendance is going down. You know that. You deal with that. But what's interesting to me, in a time of crisis, especially when it comes to cancer, people don't have the spiritual connection they need to literally make it through. If they're not going to church, they don't have the support base. Is the church prepared to help them with this stuff? But moreover, people are going to internet for spiritual advice, AI, to apps. We're missing a big one here because this is a big issue and it takes a lot of patience. And I know you're there and you're probably hearing it on a higher level than you did when you were inside.
It is true. Well, we have to confront and come to terms with the digital space that we're in. Literally across the board, as we know, digital and virtual interaction has consumed our environment. Mm-hmm. And we can't just act like that doesn't exist. And that has invaded the spiritual space, the spiritual support space. And so by default, for those individuals who may have once received spiritual care and support, being part of a local church or congregation, as we know and as you alluded to, there are some reports that suggest that we have a decline of actual interaction, church attendance, membership, somewhere in the neighborhood between 40 to 70%. There are some church spaces that have some growth, but many of our mainline denominational church spaces are decreasing rapidly, which means then at the end of the day, those are people who used to be members of congregations or turn to faith for support, but they're not going anywhere. They're staying at home, just like our kids who don't go outside and play any longer. They're on a headset with a joystick, pretending that they're in the middle of World War II or back in the medieval ages. Same dynamic is at play with regard to where people are now looking for community and access. And so we've got to get involved with this. And certainly from a spiritual care perspective to cancer patients, this is front and center on my radar and where I'm focusing my time and my attention now.
So virtual faith support, it's not a true sense of connection.
It's not a true sense of connection, but as we learned from COVID changed the game. You know, everybody began to start, they were forced to begin to interact in a very different and unique way. Church attendance, as we know, there are a lot of churches. I think 150,000 churches closed down last year. Many of those churches never opened back up as a result of COVID. And so those people stayed at home and many of them never returned. And so we've got to figure out a way to create as best we can connection and interaction and in the virtual spaces where we have to go. And so it's not necessarily true connection, but it is still better than no connection at all where people were just sequestered and staying to themselves.
Pulling on your experience in the past, are medical facilities more open to faith-based operations within their walls?
Yes, interestingly, that also is one of the trends over the last 2 years, that faith-based services and support is being increased as an awareness. Now, the give and take with that is, of course, the political correctness of the climate. Is that then the terminology is shifting from religious support to spiritual support that then begins to be very watered down because, again, people are saying that I'm not necessarily religious, and therefore by default what they are saying is I'm not necessarily part of a Christian orientation, but I do believe in esoteric kind of spirituality, you know, mindfulness, yoga, Reiki therapy, those sorts of things. And so there's a challenge there also, because now that conversation has gotten broadened and then now it's being watered down, but there is still very much an emphasis and an increase with regard to making sure that people's quote unquote spiritual needs are being addressed as a cancer patient.
You're doing a podcast, you're hearing from listeners all over, and congratulations, by the way. I understand it's very successful, and it needs to be because you got the answer. But it is the point of contact. It is the open door. I mean, eventually you want them to be touched by a human being, don't you?
Eventually we do. We certainly want to encourage people to gain agency through community. And there's still, you know, substantial community that's available. People may have to look a little bit harder, a little bit deeper. They may have to drive a little bit further to find it. But absolutely, we don't want people to be isolated unnecessarily. And until we can kind of get them to that place, because as we know, some of the major factors of church attendance decrease and so on and so forth has aided and assisted in this. People are not comfortable, in some cases maybe feel distrustful, et cetera, until they can find a community that they feel comfortable in, accepted by, et cetera. Then we have to bridge that gap. We have to create a bridge, and that's what Percy McCray Ministries has been designed to do with our channel, what we do on Thursday night with prayer for cancer patients and their family members, all of the interviews that we do with doctors, nutritionists, people who have gone through this experience, so people can at least tap into some information until they can find some community and some human contact.
You were national director there at the City of Hope, and that organization is known for dealing with the whole person, right?
Correct, and a lot of research, so that's kind of their primary areas.
But dealing with the whole person is what you brought in, the spiritual dimension of the whole person. It was more than just medicine and treatment. It was, there's a soul there, there's a person there. And
yeah, the holistic approach, whole person care, mental, emotional, spiritual, and along with good medical advocacy. So again, a complementary approach, because again, if you're treating just the human body, but there's something else going on or disconnected from a life source perspective, and we're talking about our spirit now. In many cases, we saw patients who declined receiving excellent medical care, but they weren't being spiritually nurtured or empowered. And so, yeah, we have to have both of those working in tandem with each other for sure.
All right, that's where I want to go. So let me take a break here. I want to come back and drill down on that. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out Percy's podcast. I think you'll find that to be very helpful and resourceful. Health and Hope and Inspiration podcast. And of course, all that can start through his new website, PercyMcCrayMinistries.org. And there's a picture of his landing page. When I grow up, I want to have his smile. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and always an honor and a joy to have with us Reverend Percy McCray. He's quite the guy. He has his own ministry now, PercyMcCrayMinistries.org, which zeroes down on everything that we're talking about, the whole person approach to cancer treatment. That is his website picture there, and he does have a podcast. Check it out, Health, Hope, and Inspiration podcast. Percy, I was trying to think during the break how to ask this question. Do you believe that more and more treatment centers are recognizing the whole person approach to treating cancer?
I do. In fact, there's data and research that supports the fact that that trend is in the upward trajectory. So that's good news. That's excellent news. It's just the ability to be able to navigate through the landmine, again, of the political correctness of the public square with regard to how and where do you dig in. And this is where having well-trained individuals who can first and foremost assess, kind of the spiritual state of being of that individual, but also having an organization that understands that if we're going to kind of have this kind of political correct landscape, to make sure that one of the options of that so-called political correctness is still some traditional Christian counseling and support that can be available for those who ascribe to that belief system. We know that there are other belief systems and other esoteric spiritual practices that many people are kind of honing in on, but we want to make sure that we don't lose that element and dynamic so that they are a part of the menu and are at the table when those individuals walk through the front door of those organizations.
So I want people to know, listening and watching to us today, wherever you are, and we have a footprint of over 6 million people, so hopefully the right person at the right time is listening. To get a hold of Percy, if you're in the middle of cancer treatment and you're kind of lost in this maze of whatever you're going through, and especially if the treatment center doesn't recognize the whole person approach, get a hold of Percy, PercyMcCrayMinistries.org, and have this conversation with him. But to that point, the treatment centers that don't recognize the whole person approach, and I don't want to be negative, the only reason I'm going down this road is because I've helped some people through this, and that is, it's devastating to think that you're just a number on a chart.
And, I spent 30 years in that industry, as you know, retired now 2 years. And it was amazing how many patients I personally met, spending 18 years at the bedside before I went into the executive level of the organization, who would often say, the last couple of doctors that I went to, or the last hospital that I went to, there was no personal care. No one was invested in who I was as a person, and certainly no one was really invested in who I was from a spiritual care perspective. And it is devastating. But more than that, part of the devastation is not being empowered to work through, in many cases, what can be limitations with medicine and science. And this is where particularly Christian belief systems become so important, because we do still serve a God that, we can believe and expect things to take place when the natural may run out of options or the ability to expect possibly good things to happen. And of course, we can summarize that feeling in one word called hope. Where there is no hope, the Bible says the hope is the heart is made sick. And so we need to continue to tap into and help people to be able to hold on to the hope of God and the faith of God that potentially may turn their situation around, or while they're working through some of the more negative aspects of treatment and care, which happens to a lot of cancer patients, and they begin to feel hopeless, they begin to experience depression, and may want to just say, I don't want to do this any longer, when potentially there's still yet light at the end of the tunnel.
Because we're living in a culture, and you've mentioned it several times here, the political correctness that interrupts some of this stuff. That it's a reality, and it's a frustration, and sometimes it's a big hurdle. And in that, there is no value of life. They just don't value life, and you run into that, and it's a serious obstacle. In one case, I remember working with a family, actually advising them to leave that institution and go somewhere else because they just weren't getting it. And that brings into question sometimes the motive, and I want to say this, I don't like saying this, but I just want to put it on the table. Sometimes you even have to check the heart of palliative care. What's its motive? You know, is it really there to help, or is it there to open up a bed?
What it is, yeah, it's the push and pull again at the heart of our core Christian values.
Right.
Is the fact that we are human, but we're connected to a triune God who created heaven and earth. And so everything is not reliant upon what we can muster up in our own ability, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of historic medical approaches, and in the example that you just cited, basically places all of the burden on what we can do in our own humanity, how smart the doctors are or are not, how great the technology is or is not, how great the medicine is or isn't. And all of that has a limitation. All of that has a inroad. I used to, on the road when I am preaching and teaching, I would often say that we have to remember that doctors are only practicing medicine. Mm-hmm. They're only practicing. They haven't perfected medicine. They're only, and a good ethical doctor will tell you, there's only so much that I have the ability to do. So if we take the spiritual component out of that equation, then we leave the patient with nowhere to go in terms of dealing with their mental and emotional dynamics and struggles if it's only up to the doctor who is only practicing medicine. Mm-hmm. So we have to change that paradigm, and that's where the spiritual care component and specifically Christian belief systems, because part of our Christian belief system is God is a healer. He's Jehovah Rapha. God is our peace, Jehovah Shalom, et cetera, et cetera. We can't generate that with our medical doctor when he or she will tell you, I'm only practicing medicine.
When people are dealing with cancer, the thing that nobody wants to talk about is it brings into focus clearly our immortality.
Yep.
And nothing wakes you up to that issue faster than being diagnosed with cancer. And you deal with that. I mean, that's kind of like the initial shock that you have to walk people through, right?
Well, as one cancer patient whom I supported for many, many years said to me, before it was my turn to hear those words, almost 6 years ago now, is that it is the only word when it is directed to you personally that you hear with big, bold, loud letters in your head. And after you hear that you have cancer, you don't hear anything else after that. It completely consumes the consciousness of your thoughts. And you have to have some time to process through hearing the words, you have cancer. And so absolutely, it's a shock. It's a jolt. I remember the day when I got that phone call. My grandchildren were visiting me here from up north. They're out in the pool playing. And my GI called and said, listen, you need to contact the surgeon right away. You have a golf ball sized tumor and it needs to be removed. And, I hung up the telephone after, 22 years of being in this industry and providing ministry to people. I didn't even tell my wife immediately because I needed to just process that internally first and go, okay, now where am I going to go and what am I going to do? So yeah, it consumes you and it will knock you flat down, and you really need to have support, community, information that will then kind of lift you back up and put you back on your feet so then you can start moving in a direction.
All right, that's so well said. Again, Percy McCray Ministries.org is a connecting point for you. If you're hearing those words for the first time, you may want to just give them an email, send them a buzz, whatever, connect here and take advantage of
Absolutely
what he's done. Because I think that, that sense of overwhelmness, I mean, you talk about on the floor, everything comes into focus, your faith, your vulnerability, your health, your future, the whole thing just is a wave of emotions. And if you don't have a counterbalance to it, boy, you can get rocked right out of your world.
Well, I tell people all the time what I've learned and what I know is that cancer can become the greatest gift to us because, to your earlier point, it makes you stop and think about your mortality. What do you want to do with whatever time that you do have left? And you want to make every day matter. You want to make every day count. And it causes you to say, listen, I don't want to fool around because I don't have forever to do X, Y, and Z. It puts greater importance upon the qualitative state of your life versus the quantitative state of your life.
All right, I got about a minute and a half here. I want you to just share what the Lord's telling you right now to somebody that's struggling.
Yeah, with that, I would simply say this, that cancer is not necessarily the end of the road. Cancer is beatable. In many cases, it is treatable, and it is survivable. But one needs to have community and agency to work through the mental and emotional dynamics. And so my overall comment to you is, remember at the end of the day that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Cancer cannot and does not have to be the end of a conversation. In fact, it can become the beginning of a new conversation of purpose and a reinvestment of who you are as a human being. And so be hopeful and be mindful that there are many people who have survived potentially what you are going through today. You are not alone and you are not by yourself.
Do you think this is an avenue that churches should be trained in?
Yes, indeed. In fact, I have an announcement to make to you. Hopefully within the first quarter of this year, I will be launching my own online cancer care leadership training program.
Wonderful.
So I'm finishing up a book, a cancer toolkit, a workbook, and then there will be a actual virtual online training that anyone of any church and any orientation that they can attend so that they can be equipped to go back to their local community and their church to support anyone dealing with cancer. Coming to you soon.
Oh, wonderful. All right, Percy McCray Ministries.org. Brother, you're an inspiration. I remember when.
Me too. Me too. Thank you for being my friend.
Well, you're a blessing and an inspiration. God bless you, friend. Let's stay connected.
All right, take care, buddy. Talk to you soon.